Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast, hosted by Alison Humphries. The Recruitment Leadership Podcast is here to help those in the recruitment industry gain awareness and understanding on the hot topics faced by those in the business of hiring people. In each episode, Alison Humphries is joined by a fellow expert to offer professional knowledge, insight and advice on the biggest subjects affecting recruitment businesses. It's the podcast to listen to for recruitment business frontrunners seeking expert information from industry-leading advisors. Welcome to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to another episode of the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. I'm Alison Humphries of Recruitment Leadership. Thank you for joining us yet again. If you are a new listener, please hit subscribe. This well-regarded, I'm going to say it, podcast features fellow professionals who specialise in the recruitment market. So it's a mixture of really helpful suppliers, business owners, and indeed thought leaders across the industry. And we're very much geared, clues in the name, to people who lead recruitment businesses. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Gagan Sidhu of Firefish Software. Now, some of you may not be aware of Firefish, but I doubt that. Firefish is a widely used CRM system and marketing system combined. Gagan is Senior Business Partner at Firefish. Gagan, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Alison. Real pleasure to be on the podcast.
Gagan, you've been with Firefish for some time. You have an experience yourself directly working in the recruitment industry. We're here today to look at two reports, actually. The first one was published in January, and it's called The Future of the Recruitment Industry. So that was a survey about expectations for 2026, as well as what was actually going on in terms of activity. Just give us a background on your sample group here. So clearly you're taking real data from Firefish clients. Just give us an idea how many people responded.
Yeah, absolutely. So the data is built up of all of our Firefish client network. Obviously, it's completely anonymised, but it gives us the opportunity to dive into different sectors and different recruitment types. Currently, we have over 720 clients in the recruitment space, ranging from one-man band lifestyle businesses all the way through to some enterprise accounts as well.
Okay, thank you. Now, we're not here to just talk through a report that was published in January. What we're going to do is use as a bouncing off point a sort of compare and contrast with the report published this month in June 26, called the Job Flow Benchmark Report. So this is the reality check. How many of those expectations of business owners turned into reality, and what is the data telling us? One of the things that interested me when I read through it was that there's some really major trends that I think, because they've been very slow, very gradual trends, a lot of recruitment business owners may have missed the implications of. But let's start, first of all, with the January report on the future. So I'd like to start by just summarising what I took from the report in January, and then I'm going to hand over to you, Gagan, to talk about how that's turned out in reality. Okay?
Sure.
So again, drawn from a wide variety of sectors in recruitment, what we noticed was that the majority of agency leaders were feeling optimistic about 2026. And that's priced in that they were well aware of things like the Employment Rights Act, the broader economic picture. What they didn't know about was, of course, the war in the Middle East that has started since. But there was a definite and strong shift from negativity about the market to optimism about the market, particularly in London. 70% of London recruitment respondents reported high optimism. Now, I'm going to be a bit cynical about that, because having worked in the recruitment world for 40 years, I think we are a community that is essentially optimistic You kind of have to be.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
but nevertheless, if you contrast it with previous sentiments, it's a definite shift. The other things that I pulled out were that the number one priority for recruitment businesses was not AI. Now, obviously, that features quite a lot, but it was business development in all its forms, but especially the quality of human interaction. So we'd be speculating, but any business owner who has flirted with AI will have realized that it is not a silver bullet and that it won't transform your business if you've got rubbish data to build it on and if your human interactions are poor. So BD, number one priority. And the other thing that I pulled out was that more opportunity was already being felt in many sectors. So that was back in January. We had a chunky expectation that business would increase, well, from 1 to 50%, 84% of businesses expected to be seeing more revenue, of which 53% were expecting to see an increase of up to 25%. So not unrealistic, but not wildly optimistic, but nevertheless sensing opportunity. At the same time, there is a real recognition that there is friction in certain markets and that piling into new markets where you don't have relationships or inside knowledge or a mature candidate database may not be worth the cost, despite the anecdotal evidence that you've heard. That was particularly highlighted in the construction sector and the technology sector. And so one imagines that people who are thinking, oh, that's where the money is, are going to find things harder than perhaps they imagined. The other key figures, I think, were that, interestingly, directors of recruitment businesses, and they're not necessarily directors in fact, they could be directors in name, of course, were considerably more confident than actual CEOs and founders. 67% of directors felt confident compared to 48% of CEOs and founders. And I'm going to put it that maybe that's to do with the reality of the costs of employing our own staff, the costs of marketing that some of those directors may not fully be aware of. So that's a brief summary. I'm going to hand over to you, Gagan, now to talk us through how it turned out in reality, if you would.
Thank you, Alison. Yeah, I would say it's turned out pretty much very positive. So the underlying direction in the market is definitely one of growth. And if we look at some areas, I've got 5 areas that I think are quite strong indicators of what that direction looks like. So essentially, if we look at the amount of jobs that we've created between January and the end of May, job creation was actually up by 9.5%. Now, when we look at jobs that are being created overall and the number of placements that we've got in the market, and the trajectory and the outcome have been very, very much that of growth. Placements are also up 6.6%. Now, the data is telling a bit of a story around actually where are those placements coming from and what candidates are getting those placements. So overall, when we look at the flow of data from the candidates, it's actually also up by 7.2%. What's interesting is the source of where those candidates are actually coming from. Now, here at Firefish, we absolutely talk about how your data is the key to everything in recruitment and how we help you turn that data into revenue. And actually, it couldn't be more true because when we look at this data, it shows that the best source of data and the source of data that is giving you the highest return on investment is actually coming from your database and nurturing of relationships, as opposed to in previous years where a lot of that candidate source and a lot of that candidate data was coming from job boards. Job boards and advert creation have actually declined. So yeah, I guess it really does bring it back to the point that your data is your biggest asset, and learning how to keep that data engaged does give you the really positive outcomes that we're looking for. Now, when we think of, if we look at all the data behind the jobs that have been created, in particular, the contract and the temp jobs market gave us an increase of 24%. So despite us starting with an unusually high January and lots of trajectory around perm markets as well, it's actually the contract and the temp data that has really stood out with that increase of 24%.
Okay. And that was a figure that was really jumping out to me, 24% growth in temp and contract jobs, because this is one of what I refer to the boiling frog changes in recruitment. So for anyone who doesn't know the reference, Charles Handy famously wrote about boiling frogs, that if you put them into a pan of cold water and then heat it up gently, the boiling frog doesn't realise that the water is getting hotter and hotter and hotter because it's a gradual change, and therefore they wait in the pan until it's, well, too late. Let's just put it that way. Now, the direction of travel in employment in its widest sense has been away from traditional permanent work, which of course still represents the vast majority of the workforce in the UK, but moving away from that towards more flexible and less traditional models. Obviously, temp and contract is one of those, but there's the whole gig economy, as it's referred to, and it's a reflection of two things. Obviously, increasing costs of employment and increasing uncertainty. So more and more employers are not wanting the liability that comes with permanent hires, or looking at the alternatives that they wouldn't previously have considered. And more employers, in my experience, are also looking for more guaranteed outcomes. So, for example, a personal services company contractor actually agrees, when you place them in a contract, to complete a project or a piece of work. They're not simply being paid for their hours. And you see that at its apotheosis, really, when clients are engaging recruiters on statement of works contracts. So in other words, they're not just supplying labour, they are actually supplying services to clients. And I see no reason why that is going to change in current government policy, and also because of the economic uncertainty. And just a note for listeners as well, this data is actually far more relevant to recruiters and reliable than government level data, because A, the classifications, like where the growth is in sectors and types of jobs, is much more accurate because it's drawn from real Firefish clients. And B, it is drawn from jobs they've actually input to their Firefish CRM, rather than hearsay, where most government data comes from until it's confirmed ultimately by HMRC and tax records. Okay, please carry on, Gagan.
Brilliant. So actually, jobs is probably quite a nice thing to dive into around the adverts, because if we look at the data now, it is showing that year on year, job adverts have decreased. So that whole piece about we're not just putting contractors into a role and paying them by hours. It is actually, the data's showing us that the biggest thing that we projected was that business development was going to lead the way. And ultimately, all of the data that we look at from the placements does also suggest that it's business development and recruiters creating their own opportunities, which is actually giving you the positive results that that we are looking for. So from a data perspective and from a Firefish perspective, it's definitely something that we think is here to stay. We seem to, as an industry, be moving away from your traditional advert-led recruitment and moving much more closely into sourcing-led models. It's the same for perm jobs as well. So if we look at perm job creation, although it is a slightly softer amount of perm jobs that have come through, there's still a positive growth there. I believe it's 0.3% monthly and 3% versus where we were in January. Even for the perm roles that we are creating, it's very much driven by the business development sourcing model, as opposed to just waiting on advert responses to come in and yeah.
Right. And we've got two things going on there. Number one is we've seen that much greater availability of candidates. So, I think recruiters in general have realised that advertising can just create a heap load of work for no benefit, with more and more people just applying for jobs fairly randomly. And secondly, there's a realisation happening now, I'm very pleased to say, that bringing to life, realising the value that is already sitting in your database has really risen up recruitment leaders' agendas. And we see the, investment in data enrichment, investment in maintaining contact cycles and so forth. So just looking at some of your data here, you've got direct applications and website applications are up 30%, just shy of 30%, and job adverts posted down by 14%. So there's a definite shift, isn't there?
Absolutely. And I think the point here is, Alison, that agencies are still winning today, and that resilience is really, really coming through. It's just about realizing that actually we're not necessarily, the model isn't to necessarily go out and buy more candidates. It's getting the value from the candidates that you have already. Existing applications going up by 8.5%, for example, is the perfect reason that your database is your gold mine. If you're keeping that database engaged, you're using your data. It's proving time and time again in all of our stats and all of our reports that actually that is the way forward to give you the positive outcomes that you're looking for.
And do you know what I'm going to add to that for emphasis? That, and I have been a client myself of recruitment agencies as well as led them. If I'm paying a recruiter who is just going to go and place an ad and screen CVs, I've got those skills myself. I can do that. Yeah. What I'm really paying for is someone who already has a network, who has already qualified those candidates, and who can either improve the quality of my shortlist or speed it up. And, hence activating a database is very much the solution to that. Quite apart from saving lots of money. Yeah.
To give you a number on that, actually, Alison, when we look through the data, spec CVs is an activity that we actually measure. So how many spec CVs you're sending out and how that is converting. So actually the activity shows spec CVs, even where you're finding your own opportunities, even that is up by 736% year on year. And I think that's
736%.
Absolutely. So
wow. And that's an old school way of developing business, isn't it?
It very much is. But it brings it back to exactly what you were saying. It's not necessarily, pop out an advert and get your candidate. The true value of recruitment is that you guys have the skills, you have that knowledge and that ability to pull out value from those candidates. And that's why your clients get the good outcomes and the perfect fit. I think it's very telling that we are in a very, very value-led market. Recruiters aren't waiting for jobs to just land. They're creating those opportunities. And the best recruiters aren't waiting for the market. They're actually helping to create the markets that they want to be experts in. And rather than diversifying in sector, it is that it's brilliant to be, an inch wide, but a mile deep in that knowledge. So you can really add the value for what you're doing for every client.
Okay. Yeah. And just one other thought on that point. It does underline to me the importance of, with really placeable candidates, of actually asking them for exclusivity on representing them and then doing something about it. As clearly, lots of Firefish users are doing something about it. Right. Okay. So those are the headlines. There's a lot more in the report that I know listeners will be interested in seeing and, comparing it to their own experience. But I want to emphasize that turning data into revenue is key. And we have, as human beings, we have an instinct that if we haven't felt something, even if the data backs it up, if we haven't personally felt something, we tend to say that can't be happening. There must be something dodgy about this data. Therefore, we tend to ignore those things, like the shift from permanent to contract and temp recruitment. The other piece is that this is drawn, as I mentioned earlier, from what Firefish's clients are actually doing in their systems. It is not hearsay. It is not opinion. So, Gagan, I know that people can download the report if they want. How should they go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for anybody that wants to download, if you pop across to the Firefish website, you'll see the ability to access our job flow index. You can keep up to date with our monthly job flows, but you can also then download all of our annual, biannual reports in there as well.
Okay, lovely. Right. Well, only remains for me to thank Gagan and Firefish for the report and your time recording this today. This has been the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. If you'd like to know more about how you can turn this into money, that's what I do. I'm a non-exec and board advisor. Please contact me on alison@recruitmentleadership.co.uk or via LinkedIn. Gagan, how should they contact you if they want to explore this in more detail?
Thanks, Alison. So I am available. You can pop me a message on LinkedIn. My profile is just Gagan Sidhu, which, I'll share a link with Alison. Or you could email me directly at gsidhu@firefishsoftware.com. And if neither of those options work, then please feel free to go on our website, click on your book a demo link, and one of us, either myself or someone in the team, would be absolutely excited to have a quick call with you and take you through a discovery process.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much. And do click subscribe if you haven't done already. Thanks for joining us on the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.
You've been listening to the Recruitment Leadership Podcast. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe, review and share so that others can find the podcast too. We really appreciate your support. If you have any questions about the topics covered or wish to find out more about recruitment leadership, please email alison@recruitmentleadership.co.uk, referencing the podcast. We're also on LinkedIn, where you can follow Recruitment Leadership and connect with Alison Humphries. Thank you for listening, and we hope you join us next time for another episode of the Recruitment Leadership Podcast.